We are back with more of our conversation with Amal and George Clooney. Look at the way these two look at each other. I can't get over this. The power couple joined us in studio on a very big day for them. It was their 8th wedding anniversary.
At 62 years old, Brad Pitt has spent decades being asked about everyone else's life except his own. And for just as long, he has mastered the art of saying almost nothing while somehow saying enough to make headlines. So when his name recently became attached, once again, to whispers about George Clooney's marriage, the internet did what it always does. It ran with a headline before checking the ground beneath it. But before we go further, let's be clear about something important. There is no verified footage, no documented interview, and no official transcript in which Brad Pitt exposes the real reason behind George Clooney's marriage. What exists instead is a tangled web of old interviews, decades-long friendship lore, public appearances, and cultural assumptions that have been stitched together by tabloids eager for clicks. This is the story of where that narrative actually comes from, what has been factually reported, and why the friendship between two of Hollywood's most private public men continues to fascinate an audience that has never stopped watching them. To understand why any statement from Brad Pitt about George Clooney would carry weight, you have to go back to the late 1990s, when both men were rising through an industry that rewarded charisma but punished vulnerability. They met on the set of Ocean's 11 in 2001, a film that would not only become a box office phenomenon but the beginning of a genuine, publicly documented friendship. Unlike many Hollywood pairings born of publicity, theirs continued long after the cameras stopped rolling, extending through 2 more Ocean's films, red carpet appearances, and the kind of easy camaraderie that journalists noticed precisely because it seemed unforced. Clooney has spoken openly, in interviews with outlets like GQ and Esquire, about the practical jokes he and Pitt have played on each other over the years, a detail that has been repeated so often it has become part of Hollywood folklore. It's within that long friendship that speculation about marriage advice, private opinions, and emotional influence has taken root. For years, both actors carried public reputations as two of the industry's most famous bachelors, men who seemed allergic to permanence even as they built empires. Clooney, in particular, spent much of the 2000s openly stating in interviews that he did not believe marriage was in his future. He said it enough times, in enough interviews, that it became accepted as fact. Then, in 2014, everything changed. He married Amal Alamuddin, a British-Lebanese barrister with an already distinguished career in international law and human rights. The wedding, held in Venice, was covered by nearly every major outlet on Earth, not because it was scandalous, but because it seemed so genuinely unexpected from a man who had built a public persona around resisting exactly this kind of commitment. It is that contrast between the Clooney who once swore off marriage and the Clooney who found it with Amal that created a permanent hunger for explanation. And because Brad Pitt was one of the people closest to him during those bachelor years, audiences naturally began looking to Pitt for insight nobody else could offer. This is where fact and speculation begin to blur. Pitt has, on separate occasions, spoken warmly about Clooney's marriage in interviews, but always in general, complimentary terms rather than revealing private conversations. In a 2016 interview, Pitt praised Amal's intelligence and credited her with bringing out a side of Clooney the public rarely saw. He did not, in that interview or any documented one since, claim to reveal a hidden motive or secret reasoning behind the marriage itself. What likely fuels today's headlines is a combination of older interview clips being recirculated, YouTube commentary channels reinterpreting vague statements as revelations, and the algorithm-driven incentive to frame ordinary friendship commentary as an exposure. This pattern is not unique to Pitt and Clooney. It happens whenever two famous friends discuss each other publicly, and a single warm or reflective comment gets repackaged into something resembling a confession. The truth, as documented by entertainment journalists who have covered both men for over 2 decades, is far less sensational than the internet suggests. Clooney's own explanation for his marriage, given in multiple interviews including one with Deadline in 2015, credited Amal's brilliance, her humanitarian work, and an emotional connection he described as unlike anything he had experienced before. He has repeatedly stated that meeting her changed the trajectory of his personal philosophy about partnership, something no friend, however close, could manufacture or explain on his behalf. Still, the fascination with Pitt's perspective persists, and it says less about factual revelation and more about the public's desire to understand two intertwined case studies of Hollywood masculinity. Pitt's own history with marriage, particularly his relationships with Jennifer Aniston and later Angelina Jolie, has made him a symbol of the industry's complicated relationship with commitment. His divorce from Jolie, finalized after a lengthy legal process that stretched from 2016 well into the following years, was covered extensively by legitimate outlets, and it undeniably shaped how audiences interpret anything he says about marriage today. When a man who has publicly struggled with long-term partnership speaks about another man's marital happiness, audiences instinctively search for deeper meaning, even when none has been confirmed to exist. This is precisely why speculative headlines about Pitt exposing the truth behind Clooney's marriage spread so easily. They tap into an existing narrative the public has already built in its collective imagination, one where two friends who once represented an era of guarded bachelorhood now represent two different outcomes, one who eventually found lasting partnership, and one who has continued to navigate high-profile relationships with more visible turbulence. It's an emotionally resonant contrast, and emotional resonance, more than verified information, is often what drives viral entertainment content. None of this diminishes the real, well-documented friendship between the two men. In fact, understanding the difference between fabricated claims and factual history makes their bond even more interesting, because it removes the manufactured drama and replaces it with something more human. Two men who came up in an unforgiving industry together, weathered very public personal lives, and remained close despite living very different versions of adulthood. There is also historical context worth remembering here. Hollywood friendships, especially between leading men of a certain era, have long been subject to public curiosity about loyalty, rivalry, and influence. From the Rat Pack decades earlier to more modern ensembles like the Ocean's cast, audiences have always wanted to believe that famous friends shape each other's biggest life decisions. Sometimes that's true in subtle ways, through shared experiences or mutual understanding of fame's pressures. But direct causal claims, especially about something as personal as why someone chose to marry, are rarely something even close friends can honestly claim to fully explain, let alone package into a tidy soundbite for a documentary-style YouTube video. What we can say with confidence is this. George Clooney's marriage to Amal Alamuddin has, by every available public account, remained stable and affectionate for over a decade, marked by shared humanitarian work, 2 children born in 2017, and a continued public partnership that has largely stayed out of tabloid scandal, a rarity in itself. Brad Pitt, meanwhile, has spoken about marriage, fatherhood, and personal growth in more reflective terms in recent years, particularly following his own legal and personal restructuring after the Jolie divorce. Interviews from outlets like GQ in 2022 and 2023 show a version of Pitt more introspective about past relationships, focused on sobriety, art, and personal healing rather than offering commentary on his friends' marriages. So when a title suggests Brad Pitt has exposed the real reason behind George Clooney's marriage, the responsible answer is that no such exposure exists in verified public record. What exists instead is decades of overlapping interviews, genuine friendship, contrasting personal journeys, and an audience eager to connect the dots into something more dramatic than reality actually offers. Perhaps that's the more compelling story after all, not a hidden confession, but the quiet, complicated truth of two men who built their public identities around independence, only to watch one of them find an entirely different kind of fulfillment in partnership, while the other continues, very publicly, to search for his own version of peace. In an industry built on image and speculation, the most human thing about Pitt and Clooney's story isn't a secret revealed. It's the fact that even after all these years, in an era where nearly everything is recorded, dissected, and repackaged for clicks, some truths about love and friendship remain exactly what they've always been: private, complicated, and entirely their own to define.